But when a child dies of leukemia and they're dead...
Could there be a purpose to it? What if the death of the child brings their parents to God,
then
to
perhaps
salvation?
then the parents should be grateful that their child got leukemia. The God that you believe in, let's say, if we grant that there is a creator deity who sort of brings about the universe of conscious creatures, have you ever heard of the evil God hypothesis that Stephen Law popularized or came up with?
Tell me it.
So the idea is that, like, imagine that there's a God who brings about the world and creates the world, but does it maliciously because he wants human beings to suffer. He brings about a world in order so that human beings will suffer. Right? That seems like a plausible hypothesis. And
that seems like a plausible hypothesis. A God that, wow. I'm so interested why that seems like a plausible hypothesis. Let's keep going.
If you think that consciousness points towards God, the kind of God that a lot of Christians think is a sort of necessary quality of God, which is to be all-loving, might not have to apply here.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
If Christianity were true, is it plausible that suffering is necessary for God's purpose, for his
if Christianity
creation?
is true, then I think it must be necessary because there'd be no other explanation.
Okay, so we're not talking about whether or not Christianity is true.
But if you're asking me if it's plausible that Christianity is true and therefore suffering is necessary, I would say probably not, because I don't think suffering should be necessary or could be necessary. If God exists and wants to come to know everybody and wants to love everybody and does so for the sake of human beings, why he chose to imbue the world with so much suffering that is at least seemingly completely inexplicable.
Are you a father?
No.
I'm a father.
Doesn't answer the question at all. Are you a father? I'm a father.
I want my son to become just like I am, better than I am.
One of the great challenges in this world.
Gotta love an advertisement.
Knowing enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong.
I feel like that is exactly what I wanted to say right there about the people that are in this video.
Might be able to justify an amount of suffering, right? But the fact that there's so much gratuitous suffering in the world is what I think makes God's existence unlikely.
So much gratuitous suffering makes God's existence unlikely. And what I would respond back to that is quite the opposite. If you look at Genesis, just look at Genesis, because there's two factors here that I think are majorly at play. One, if you take a look at Genesis 1, because there's two thought processes behind this, especially if you look at a biblical scholarly view. Thought process one is, look at Genesis 1, there was already chaos in the world. What do I mean by that? That doesn't make any sense. Let me show you. So I want to pull up one thing that I think isn't talked about enough. Genesis chapter 1, because there's two creation stories in here. I want to talk from a biblical scholarly perspective. One thing that could account for this suffering, if you look just at verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. So we have four things being talked about here already. Void, darkness, face of the deep, and without form. So that was all already there. And God said, let there be light. So God's creating the light. All these other things are already in existence. A lot of Christians think God created things ex nihilo, meaning out of nothing. That's not necessarily what the Bible tells us. Genesis chapter 1 talks about the void, the darkness, the deep. And in a lot of cultures at that time, those things were chaos, evil. That's what those words would be used to describe. If you look at what Genesis chapter 1 really does, God's putting order to everything. If you look at it, it says he separates the light from the darkness. He separates the water from the land. He does all of these things to separate everything, to put them into their place. And that's why a lot of biblical scholars believe Genesis chapter 1 is telling the story of order out of chaos, which means there was chaos already there, and God's putting order to it. So in that case, suffering, evil, void, darkness, all of those things already existed, and God is trying to put order to them. That's one way to look at it. Now, I want to give you a totally different way to look at it. Why is there so much suffering? Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden. Let's go back to that story. It's a very famous story, and many people know it. But why does that account for the amount of suffering? So if you look at that story, there was no humans eating animals. There were no animals eating animals. They were herbivores. And you might be going, what the heck are you talking about? And I want to point you to Genesis. Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, and God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything, what does everything mean? Everything. To everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. There is no conversation about meat eating at all. None of that happens until after the flood. So if you look at it from a literary standpoint and you go, why is there so much suffering? God could have made animals to all be herbivores. According to Genesis chapter 1, some biblical scholars believe God did make all animals to be herbivores. It was after the fall of man. It was after the sin. It was after the decisions that mankind brought that eventually gave us the world we have today. Now let's keep watching.
But when a child dies of leukemia, and they're dead.
Could there be a purpose to it? What if the death of the child brings their parents to God?
Then
to
perhaps
salvation?
then the parents should be grateful that their child got leukemia because it's doing the will of the Lord.
not necessarily.
That seems
All
right,
obscene
pause.
to me.
No.
It seems obscene to me too. Could there be a purpose to it? Of course, there could be a purpose to everything. Are you serious though? Is that the first place your mind goes to when you're thinking about the death of a child? Is could there be a purpose to it? You said something, and I think we have to look at this from a biblical perspective. Could those parents be, I mean, as you said it yourself, could those parents find God through it? Yes. That is not the purpose of the death. That is a beautiful thing that could happen from the death. One doesn't make the other possible. It's not as if that had to happen so that the other could happen. The kid didn't have to die so the parents could find God. That's obscene to me too. The parents finding God is the way in today's society that God makes something beautiful out of tragedy. If you look all throughout the Bible, that's exactly what God does. God takes tragic circumstances and makes beautiful things happen out of those. Because beautiful things happen out of those, a certain amount of people add to their theology that those bad things happen so beautiful things can happen. No. Those bad things happen. Horrible, bad, tragic. Something good coming out of it is God's way to say something horrible happened. Let me make some sort of beauty out of something horrendous.